Hello, internet friends. My name is Bay. Welcome back to the Shadowlands Alpha First Pass, First Impressions coverage. This is going to be the B-roll video where I'm talking about the overall thoughts on the Death Knight. And we'll start off with some overall things. I'll go over some things that I can adjust, and I have some excerpts from a few of the big Death Knight theory crafting community heads that have put forward some notes and things for me that I can sort of rattle off on other people's opinions and thoughts on a couple of key features of the overall Death Knight. So it's not just me rambling off only my thoughts, even though I do sponge up a whole bunch of things, of course, during all of my testing. That's sort of the whole point. But if you are new to the channel, or if you've been enjoying the coverage and you're not currently subscribed here on YouTube, we're trying to make this huge alpha push junket hit my channel to actually be somewhat legitimate on YouTube on the platform. So if you would like to subscribe to the channel to keep up to date with whenever I post anything, there's the subscribe button down below or the link that I'll have pinned in the comment. And of course, thank you very much for those that are already subscribed. The new feature on YouTube where you can show how long you've been subscribed to the channel is neat when I hover over those little banner flag things. So thank you very much for that. But the Death Knight. One of the first things I guess I can go right back over here too is some of the feedback. I've got notes and notes and notes in front of me are the new Runeforges. I guess the start of us all, of course, is the background footage you're going to watch here is a Necrotic Wake run on Frost Death Knight. And I'm definitely just kind of like hitting buttons and seeing things like the new Howling Blast. You'll notice a couple times in the footage. It works differently now. So I'm just trying to hit things out and mess around and not play Breath of Sindragosa, which I know is like heresy. But also, hopefully, Frost TK isn't only about breath, but if it is about breath, then just make it baseline and remove ERW. But regardless, the new Runeforges. So Hysteria, Sanguination, Spell Warding, Apocalypse, and Unending Thirst. Sanguination looks pretty cool for Blood DK. Both a survivability Runeforge as well as a DPS increasing Runeforge for a very Death Strike forward build. Spell Warding also looks strong. I have some notes here actually from Theydrin. He sent me a couple of things talking about how he talked about even how the Hysteria has potential. Looking it might actually be a better defensive option than Fallen Crusader, which could be a thing there, even though I did actually mess up my... I thought it was Hysteria, he said. He said Hysteria. Yeah. So the Runeforge there is that you get the extra runic power, and you get the adjustment to the proc that you're allowed to earn more runic power for it's 8 seconds, I believe. 20% more for 8 seconds. And that could actually be a better work than just the actual strength and the heal proc. But that's interesting, though, that Hysteria or Sanguination for blood. But that also brings into the fact that you can store up and do triple death strikes. Just like how Hysteria on Unholy DK can do triple death coils into the new Gargoyle window, which is coming back, the whole boost your Gargoyle damage window. So that's something you can work on for both of those. Hysteria also looks strong for Frost as well, but that's because Frost usually overcaps runic power. So you even generating more, obviously has Breath of Sindragosa synergy there, which should be the baseline, but it also has the potential for storing up a whole lot more or giving you more leeway for runic power to build up. But you're probably still going to want to have Razor Ice as Frost. So, and then Sanguination, of course, the tank one, Spell Warding as well is there, which could be fine. It might be a little undertuned, but normally spell damage is the scary thing for tanks. So being able to mitigate some of it is obviously good. And then, of course, Unending Thirst being that sort of open world style or leveling Runeforge looks fine. And what do I have here? Hysteria working on other RP gens that pretty much spot on. Oh, yeah, 24 RP Marrow Rens, 18 Runic Power, Heart Strike, single target, even makes Dancing Rune Weapon for blood. Give you 6 instead of the 5. So that kind of stuff does work. Unending Thirst only procs from killing blows. And Sanguination, if you don't know, the Death Strike damage increase is a up to 100% damage bonus based on the missing HP of the mob. So every 1% missing is plus 1% damage, and then it's a 5-minute cooldown when it heals you. Overall, of course, Anti-Magic Zone coming back for the DK overall looks fine. I kept forgetting it even existed. I don't think I've even cast it once in this footage behind. Maybe I cast it once. It's interesting. It was there for so long and then was gone for so long. It's just, you're not used to not every DPS having that raid utility, that group utility. But it'll definitely take a little while to get used to having Anti-Magic Zone as a thing. I almost imagine you would probably have it similar to your Death and Decay, where you'd have a D&D macro to cast at yourself, say for Blood Decay, for example, or for Unholy. And you'd also have a version of that where you would cast it with your mouse, like the drop green circle. And I can see you doing the same thing for Anti-Magic Zone, having it so you could just cast it at self, or cast it and do the normal green drop circle. Big thing, of course, on the entire utility toolkit and the damage reduction-ish style side of things is, of course, Lichborn, which there is some funny shenanigans, of course, you can do with rampant AoE on both Frost and Unholy with that 10% leech, as well as, you know, throwing off your Frostworm's Fury as Frost, getting that huge 10% leech into that giant dragon window with a big old stacked Pillar of Frost. Definitely could be a huge heal for you. But then the overall of just having the ability to Death Coil heal yourself, the old macro coming back into play, where you can, if you have above the 40 rune power you need, you can just blast yourself off the cooldown and heal yourself with a Death Coil. And that seems fine. Seems good. Bringing back that. There's a whole bunch of CC that does work against Lichborn, so you have to be careful with certain things. Like Wake of Ashes can stun you. You can be shackled by priests if you're undead. But if you put up Anti-Magic Shell beforehand, you'll block those effects unless they eat the Anti-Magic Shell and then have to then recast again or something along those lines. You cannot be feared while you're under that effect. So even turn undead, which obviously fear is undead, won't work because you're immune to fear, charm, and sleep. And you can use Lichborn reactively to those effects, just like you can use IBF. So a lot of powerful extra personal utility and a little bit of survivability coming in for the Death Knight across the board. On top of that, of course, Raise Dead coming back and Sacrificial Pact, which brings me to a bit of a bug. So Sacrificial Pact for Unholy is pretty easy. 30-second cooldown on summoning your ghoul, summoning him, blowing him up for some AoE damage, and then re-summoning him again. Not a big deal. The ghoul summon is, of course, off the GCD, but the Sacrificial Pact explosion is on a 2-minute cooldown. But for Blood and Frost, it actually is a 1-minute cooldown. I guess on the duration of your ghoul's 1-minute duration, 2-minute cooldown on summoning your ghoul, and a 2-minute cooldown on blowing him up. But that means that there's also a weird interaction where your ghoul times out after 60 seconds, after 1 minute, and will blow up, but not heal you. You only get the heal from casting Sacrificial Pact. You can macro them together because one's off the GCD and one's on. So you can immediately summon the ghoul and blow it up immediately with the same button, which may or may not be a thing. I think some of it is mostly an Unholy thing as part of the opener, because then you would just be able to resummon him right back anyway. But for Unholy and Blood, it's definitely a little bit extra healing. Like imagine popping Vamp Blood, and you can blow up your ghoul as Blood Decay, and it's 25% of your health on top of the Vamp Blood healing, on top of the Vamp Blood up the new rank you're getting, which increases the healing received during Vamp Blood by another 5%. That's huge. And then, of course, Chains of Ice. Thank you for pointing it out multiple times in the comments. I realized that I wrote down my notes here. Chains of Ice was only returning for the Blood Death Knight, not for Unholy, and obviously not for Frost. So yes, it's only for Blood DK gets back Chains of Ice, so they get their pretty OP 15-second cooldown grip into Chains of Ice back. It's pretty big. And overall, all the DKs felt fine. They really didn't feel like that different. I did talk to my DK tank a little bit in my guild about how Blood DK has so many cooldowns. So many cooldowns. And you can talent into Tombstone easier now. And you're getting Rune Tap back baseline, as well as a level up version as you go through Shadowlands with Blood Tap coming back. Rune Tap being on the GCD and Blood Tap being off the global cooldown. It's so many cooldowns. It's incredible. But I did confirm today, just talking about it on stream before I sat down to record this, is that Blood DK do take a lot more damage than other tanks. So maybe that's why they're considered the quote-unquote cooldown tank. I don't know what the actual math on that is, Bone Shield is getting a little stronger in Shadowlands, but that's all relative based on the actual numbers behind the scenes and the strength values you're going to actually have in the game. So that's not really a huge deal. So there's something to be said about that. But when you're playing a prot warrior, prot paladin, you have 2 or 3, maybe 4 buttons, and then you play a blood DK and you have 8 or 9. It does seem a little bit ridiculous. It almost seems kind of button bloaty on how many cooldowns you have, but that also gives you a lot of options, like putting up a Marrow Rend, eating it into a tombstone, and then putting a rune tap with that tombstone because DR's effect absorbs. So that increases the value of the tombstone shield, and that could be a thing you could use against magic damage on top of AMS, and then putting your AMS with your AMZ, because again, DR's effect the absorbs. And there's a lot of like really powerful, you can just use that all for yourself on top of the spell warding, Runeforge there, sorry, and then of course Sanguination if you need like the oopsie heal. And I think to wrap that up before I start reading off some other notes from other DKs here, it brings up a very weird, scary potential that may have to get adjusted from Blizzard's side of things to protect players from themselves. And this is the section where I'm going to middle of the video where please give me your feedback about this and see if you think this will be a thing, if this will happen. I'm not sure if this will be a thing, but the weapon macro swapping shenanigans. What do I mean by that? Imagine, if you will, you're a Frost Death Knight, dual-wielding double Hysteria. So you've got the extra runic power that you build up to before you pop your breath, and you've got the additional chance to, of course, proc the 20% increased runic power generation for 8 seconds. You're in breath, you're doing your breath thing, you pop your hyperthermic, new talent that allows you to reduce the cost of breath for a few seconds. So you get an extended breath window, right? You get up to like 40 seconds or so. Or higher right now. Apparently, I'm told because of the Venthyr ability, we're seeing like 70-second Breath of Syndragosas again. Which, if depending on what camp you are in the Frost DK community, Breath either made or ruined the Frost Death Knight. Well, the question I ask you here, you're in that breath window, right? What if your breath window ends, and then you weapon macro swap to Razor Ice and Fallen Crusader? Do you think that should be a thing? Same thing for Blood Death Knight. What if you got Sanguination on, and Sanguination pops, and it's on cooldown for 5 minutes? But don't put on Spell Warding, or put back on Fallen Crusader, or put on Hysteria. Not really sure if this has ever been a thing we've talked about before. The closest representation to weapon swapping due to enchants has been Rogue Poison. Back when they used to have poisons on their weapons. Now the poisons, of course, are on the rogue, so it doesn't matter your weapons are, active. Rogues used to have like a dagger that have wound poison on it, and they would switch off to wound poison to put up wound poison and then switch back over to deadly poison or instant poison or whatever have you, right? Now rogues, of course, can have double non-lethals, so they can have their crippling and their numbing poison. They'll have to have a different dagger to shiv on an extra poison. But DKs now have this conundrum. Does Blizzard let you have weird, degenerate weapon swapping for different Runeforges? Do you have on Fallen Crusader during your cooldowns? Do you have on, the double Hysterias for cooldowns? Do you have Hysteria and Razor Ice? Then you swap over to Fallen Crusader and Razor Ice. Like, what is that? I don't know if that's supposed to be a thing you're supposed to worry about. And the fact that you have to have that many more weapons just sitting around in your inventory with weapon swap macros between cooldown windows seems pretty suspect. But on top of that, there's a little bit more notes that I had on people asking me, like, how does things feel? And like I said before a little bit ago, I think everything felt fine. There's some weirdness, say, with Unholy, for example. This is an example pull. Each of these is going to be a bullet point on how you pull a boss or start an encounter. Because after a certain number of like setup abilities and buttons and GCDs that don't directly do something but still do, how many is okay? So take, for example, the possibility for an AoE-ish pull on Unholy Death Knight. You Army of the Dead, you pull. Outbreak on the walk-in. You Unholy Blight. You hit Dark Transformation for your Ghoul. You hit Soul Reaper on something. You Festering Strike twice. You hit Apocalypse. You then hit your Summon Gargoyle. You Death Coil. You cast Unholy Frenzy. You pop your Covenant ability, which are probably like the Death and Decay, Death's Due, maybe. And then you sack pack during your, Ghoul window. And then you resummon your Ghoul. And then you get Scourge Strike. That is like 15 things in a row to do all of the opening setup. And that's going to equate to what? Between up to at least 15 seconds, if not closer to 22 seconds of just GCDs into GCDs into GCDs. Now, some of those things might be a little easier to weave in, but at the same time, is that really necessary? There's a lot going on there. And yes, you are a summoner class, and yes, you're sort of like a necromancer, but not a Diablo-y necromancer. So some things in there are obviously a big part of it, like the pre-pull Army of the Dead doesn't really matter, the walk-in, outbreak, and then the immediate Unholy Blight, if you're putting that up before you really get into combat there. But when you get into combat, then you're auto-attacking, meaning you got Dark Transform, possibly Soul Reaper, double Festering Strike into Apocalypse, into Gargoyle, into multiple Death Coils. So there's a lot of setup. And I wonder, again, what are your takes on the big setup classes? We're about to do Mage here in the next couple of days, and apparently the Arcane Mage setup time is now really bad. Like, not fun bad. So we'll see what Arcane Mage setup looks like, too. And this isn't just a GCD problem, right? This isn't only a Death Knight problem. It's almost comes down to there's so many other things to be set up that some people obviously enjoy this level, because having that priority list of what you're supposed to work on and what you should be focused on and how you play in that moment-to-moment, building your opener, I guess, building your sort of opening up your painting box, all your paints, and then you start going to town is fine. But how big should that pre-pull into pull list be? Additionally, though, I have some notes over here from a shout out to DeGrain, who was helping me out with a lot of the Frost and Unholy DK testing in chat there a little bit, more so Frost. But in the Frost video that just came out, I did talk about the sort of identity crisis, and he writes here, so paraphrased but mostly quoted, is that the Frost DK, or in this case, other Death Knights to some degree, but mostly Frost, had a lot of borrowed power in the form of artifact weapons and Legion legendaries, and also multiple abilities were put on the GCD. In this case, mainly Pillar of Frost. Death Grip to a lesser extent. Death Grip does have the 100% hasted GCD, the 0.75 second one, but Pillar of Frost is the big point here. It was also paired with the new change to Empowered Rune Weapon, which went from refreshing all 6 of your runes in Legion to the effects of the Hungering Rune Weapon talent, which is the drip feed over time, which of course feeds significantly into the breath build, which, sidebar, should just be baseline. What if just a Pillar of Frost was your sort of bestial wrath, and Breath of Sindragosa was your Aspect of the Wild, like it's your big cooldown? And there would be some desync there, and you get to like store up and wait for your Pillar to come back up to funnel into breath, right? But realistically, Empowered Rune Weapon only really works with breath. Otherwise, for the normal Frost DK, you hit it whenever you're out of resources. But to go back to his topic here, it makes the breath build stronger while being pretty irrelevant for the other 2 builds, Ice Cap and Obliteration, which those 2 are naturally overflowing in resources, which Hysteria can help. They created a big problem where ERW became mandatory for breath and then used at the start of it, while being mostly useless resource-wise for the other 2 builds. And this is again DeGrain says, I believe that Empowered Rune Weapon in its current form is redundant for anything that isn't breath, and therefore its effect should be either tied to breath or the ability should be reverted to its old function or completely reworked. I mean, there's a bit more about the Pillar GCD stuff, which I've already kind of gone over again. And Ice Cap, if you haven't known this, Ice Cap got buffed for Frost DK, and now it's 4 seconds CDR instead of 3. Which right now, at the start, when you're at lower gear levels, won't really matter too much, and I couldn't experience this while testing or while playing the footage behind you. The issue is, you'll be able to get to a point right now, eventually, not right now, but eventually, that it'll affect your character in the now, where you'll have Pillar of Frost active. And if you cool down the spell too fast, you cannot recast Pillar into Pillar because you will lose the growth of your strength. So if even you pull down the cooldown of with Ice Cap for Pillar of Frost, and it's up, but you're still in the previous pillar window, you cannot recast it. If you do, you lose all the bonus strength and you restart from 0. Now, granted, this might only be an overlap of like a weird 3 or 4 seconds, but it's also just like kind of eh. But maybe that needs to be adjusted. And again, Pillar going to a 1-minute CD would save this and actually put more power into Ice Cap. And then if it was a 1-minute CD and Breath was your main cooldown CD that was 2 minutes, then you get the Breath window that lasts for 30-ish seconds or so. And you get the Ice Cap window, which is just kind of, again, like your Bestial Wrath. And then the conclusion points here is that Frost feels like it has identity crisis. This is again from DeGrain. It does not do much on its own baseline, and it needs talents and borrowed power to figure its gameplay out, which would be fine if all the talents were gameplay altering, but things like IA exists. There's also issues baseline where Frost, which could be resolved to help the spec improve. Unholy doesn't have as much of this. I think Unholy's issue is things like travel time on Dark Transformation is what face. That doesn't make any sense to me. The crazy like opener build, Frost doesn't have that crazy opener style of like 15 different things to hit. That's mainly definitely a Unholy problem. And then Blood Decay, maybe they're okay with all those buttons, but if you don't need to play all those buttons, then how do you survive certain things? Or is the amount of tools that the Blood Decay has at their disposal going to make them scarier and more potent and more damage smoothing than other tanks? And there are other little things here that I have noted down. Say, for example, Two-Hand Frost is a big deal coming back, right? But Two-Hand Frost, what I was told, this is from Tuesday, that because dual wielding attacks way faster, and you have that 19-ish% miss rate while dual wielding, you still land more auto attacks, and Killing Machine is a big driving force behind what Frost DK does. When you auto attack slower, you're going to get less auto attack crits with a two-hander, meaning you need more crit to make the two-hander break even for your auto attack swings per minute and sort of the back end RPPM of Killing Machine. I was told you need about 30% crit baseline or higher to stay on par with your two-hander versus your dual wield. But that still also goes back to the fact that two-hand Frost can only get one Runeforge. So maybe if it was not ever going to be a breath-centric build, because I can't imagine double Hysteria or Hysteria Razor Ice would be beaten by a two-hander with just one of those. On top of the fact that things like maybe Icy Talons becomes nearly super important for two-hand Frost as well, which is cool. But it's really the Killing Machine integration there, because less Killing Machine overall might lead to less Rhyme, little things like that. I mean, Rhyme is off of any Obliterate still, but again, getting less of the crit Obliterates, which again, Obliterate also gets a rank up where it always does under Killing Machine Frost damage. So you're guaranteed to crit. It's got 30% more damage because it's ignoring armor, and it'll be affected by your mastery. It just doesn't seem like two-hand Frost currently is going to be a thing. It's all going to be still dual wield, and sure. And then little things like Apocalypse Rune, the new rune that feels like it should be for the Unholy Death Knight. It doesn't even work with anything besides your base ghoul. It doesn't work with Army of the Dead. It doesn't have any synergy with the cooldown reduction for Army of the Damned to just get Apocalypse more often. And it doesn't work on your Apocalypse ghouls. It's cool to get back your Dread Maguses, your little undead skeleton boys, but it has no interaction with them at all. So there are still some things missing. There are some tweaks that need to be done, for sure. Blood DK looks fine, just lots of buttons. Frostborn Fury being baseline is cool. Other little things, of course, look neat. The target cap stuff for Unholy is not going to affect it too much. Their Bursting Sore hard cap went from 20 to 8. There's other little target caps that have been changed there, of course, but you can check those out in the individual videos if you would like. Those came out all before this one. This is sort of just a wrap up overall thoughts on the Death Knight. Let me know what your thoughts are down below for the questions that I had and curiosities therein if you are playing a Death Knight or figuring to switch to one. Or if I've missed anything, of course, it's a big deal. Things like Breast of Sindragosa apparently is also stronger, but that's go to the Frost video for that one. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for supporting the channel, and being here through this crazy Shadowlands alpha beta time. We've got so many more videos coming up. The entire channel guide is also updated, so all of the remaining classes and specs are given a rough date depending on uptime and downtime of the servers. So go check that out if you like. And of course, if you are new here and you enjoy the content, if you've made it all this way, maybe hit that like button. That allows YouTube's algorithm to say, hey, this is good stuff and I enjoy this guy's talking six head. And also subscribe to the YouTube channel here. We're trying to hit 100,000 subs during this whole push to make my YouTube channel somewhat legit. Again, my name is Bay. Thank you for listening, and I will see you all in the mage coverage coming up next.